Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Baron and this is your Brain on Books, and today we're going to talk about my top 10 favorite books of all time. That's right, this is the creme de la creme, the ones that get me excited, the ones I want to collect multiple copies of. And I can't wait to share it with you. Now, to be clear, this maybe isn't the best books I've read from a literary perspective, but they're the ones that I love, the ones that get me excited, like I said. And that's really what it's all about. We want to keep reading and we need to have our favorites. So without further hesitation, let me get right into the list. With the first one being East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Now, I read this early last year and it blew me away and it sparked a love for John Steinbeck, and I've read a lot of his books since then, but none of them have really compared to East of Eden. This is a multi-generational story that really questions free will, nature versus nurture, and has one of the most vile antagonists that I've ever experienced through Kathy Trask. And if you've read this book, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So East of Eden at number 10. If you haven't read it, go out, pick it up. So moving on from there, number 9, I have The Giver by Lois Lowry. A while back, I made a video about my favorite books from my youth, and The Giver was top on the list. And this story has stayed with me for decades, and I have read it over and over again. Now, the writing is a little elementary, with it being a middle grade title, but nonetheless, the story is phenomenal, and it always blows me away, and it really shaped how I read from an early age. And if you haven't picked this up, it's worthwhile. There are some sequels that are they're okay, but The Giver nonetheless is a phenomenal book, and everybody should read it. So moving on from there, number 8, I have Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, I absolutely love Dune, and it's not just because of Herbert's unique writing style or the character of Paul Atreides. I love the setting. I'm not a big world building guy, but Dune, the way things are named and the language and Arrakis, it's just phenomenal. And pretty much everybody knows this book and story, and if you haven't read it, what are you waiting for? Go out there and read Dune. This is like peak sci-fi, and I absolutely love it. I have a bunch of different copies of Dune, and I'm probably going to continue to collect them for the foreseeable future because I'm just obsessed with this story and a lot of the artwork that goes along with it that I always find in these special editions. It just makes me so happy. So Dune is at number 7. So let's move on from there. Number 6, I have Death's End by Liu Cixin. This is the last book in Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, and this fundamentally changed how I looked at sci-fi. Some of the most crazy ideas and huge epic scenes that I've ever experienced, not just in sci-fi, but just in reading in general, are packed into Death's End. And I can't get into it too much with it being the 3rd book in a series, but if you haven't picked up Three Body Problem or Remembrance of Earth's Past, you really need to, especially if you're a sci-fi fan. Going on from there, I have number 6, and that's going to be Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Now, I have been singing the praises of this book for years, and I talk about it a lot on the channel because it's very important to me, and I recommend everybody pick it up. And I have not been disappointed by those who have. Pretty much everybody I know I've recommended this to that has read this story has been blown away, and rightfully so. The characterization is top tier. There are big epic moments in the story. There are emotional moments. There are tons of levity. Just everything you would want in a great book is packed into Lonesome Dove, and I would be remiss not to include it on this list. So going on from there, we're in the top 5 now. And my 5th one is going to be The Road by Cormac McCarthy, my favorite author of all time, and I knew I needed to put him on the list, and it was really hard to decide which book. I like Blood Meridian, and I've often said Outer Dark is my favorite by Cormac McCarthy, but it's not the one that stuck with me like The Road. And if I'm going to do favorite books, I gotta put The Road on here. Outer Dark, I think I was more impressed with, I was more moved by. But if I think 5, 10, 20 years from now, which Cormac McCarthy book am I going to pick up and reread over and over again? And it's got to be The Road. It's a bleak story. It's a beautiful story. It's a Pulitzer Prize winner. If you haven't read it, go out and pick up The Road. Going on from there. Number 4, I have Blackwater by Michael McDowell. I had to look at my list. I keep getting these all mixed up. This is a 6-volume story, basically a multi-generational one, kind of like East of Eden. So clearly I'm into that sort of thing. But this is a Southern Gothic setting. It is horror, but it's horror in the atmospheric quality of Edgar Allan Poe, not so much something like Stephen King. And you span several decades all through American history in a small town in rural Alabama, following a dysfunctional but affluent family. Remarkable. This is the most recent read on the list, and I didn't think that it would be able to jump up this high, but I'm obsessed with Blackwater. This is a book that the last 30% I read so slow because I did not want it to end, and immediately as I closed it, I wanted to restart it, and I'm already itching for a reread, and it hasn't been that long since I finished it. So if you haven't tried Michael McDowell, you haven't read Blackwater, pick it up, especially if you love Southern Gothic fiction. This is peak Southern Gothic right here. So going on from there, we're in the top 3. And the third, I'm kind of cheating because this necessarily isn't one book, but it goes together. It's all one story, and that's going to be The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. Wow. I love Lord of the Rings so much. I love Tolkien. I love Middle-earth, and it is incredibly important to not just me, but my family. Our household is built on Tolkien. We have the movies on infinite repeat. We've all read it. We have tons of copies of it in the household. My daughter, even at a young age, knows every single character and everything about him. Lord of the Rings is just so important to me and so ingrained in my family and what we're about that I could not include it in the top 3. Love it. I don't need to go into the story. Everybody knows Lord of the Rings. Everybody knows The Hobbit. And if there's some crazy reason why you haven't read it, you need to go out and do so. It is the pinnacle of high fantasy. So we're in the top 2. And number 2, I used to say was my favorite book, but I'll talk about why it's no longer when we get to the first one. And that is It by Stephen King. That is right. Used to be my number 1, but it has been dethroned by something else. But nonetheless, I love this book. I've read it a ton of times. The characters, oh man, the characters are so good, and I love every single bit of this story. I'm a big fan of horror. I'm a big fan of coming of age stories, and for me personally, this is as good as it gets for both of those. I never want to leave the town of Derry, despite it being horrific and crazy. I want to be there. I want to live there. And that's how I feel like when I'm reading this book, and why I continue to pick it up over and over and over. I want to go back to Derry, and I want to go back to these characters. So Stephen King, thank you for writing this book. It has had a profound impact on me. So we've made it. Number 1, and this probably won't come to as a surprise for those of you who have watched the channel for a while, and that's going to be A Magica by Clive Barker, another favorite author of mine, and this is the greatest work that he's ever written. I mean, it's phenomenal. It is dark fantasy. It is unique. It is thematically rich. It has some of the most beautiful prose that I have ever come across, and I just love this story so much. It is niche. It's not for everyone, but if you like dark fantasy and you like things that are thematically rich and nuanced and beautiful, pick up this book. And every time I read it, I am just blown away by the things I've missed, the new things I uncover. It is so complex, subtly so, but so complex. And gosh, I love this book so much. I can't even begin to express it. So that's it. That's my top 10 for now. It'll be cool looking back on this down the road and seeing, maybe how this has changed or shifted or what's moved up and down. But as of right now, I'm happy with my list. And if you hung out with me this long, thank you. And until next time, see ya.